Hey guys, I'm here today to finally talk about what I read in the months of October and November. You may have noticed in the thumbnail I'm not holding a stack of books up, and that's because barely any of them are physical books that I own. I got loads out from the library and I listened to quite a few on audio, so I've not been very good at reading from my own shelves recently, which has been really enjoyable, but also I'm aware that not so good for the books I have here. So firstly, I listened to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire on audio. I had a few years where I didn't do it every year, and then I've got back in the routine of trying to do it every year, like around autumn, winter, because for me that's the time I sort of enjoy reading the Harry Potter books the most, because it just feels really festive and cosy. So I love them all as much as I always have. The third one has always been a favourite, and the fourth one has become more of a favourite in recent years. Second, never been one of my favourite ones, but you know, it is where you first see the burrow, so always a silver lining. So not really got anything to say about those. I read them. Then I read quite a few graphic novels. So I read Pumpkinheads by Rowell and Erin Hicks, and I quite enjoyed this one. This is just a fun, fast graphic novel about two friends who work on a pumpkin patch, and the boy in the friendship has fancied this girl for years whenever he goes back to the pumpkin patch, and he never dares speak to her, so his friend says, "Oh, why don't we go across the pumpkin patch and you can finally tell her how you really feel." And it's them making the way across the pumpkin patch, and they stop off at loads of like touristy, food-based things along the way and keep getting like thwarted in reaching this girl, and you sort of watch their relationship change. Now, it's fairly obvious where the story's going to go, there's no surprises here, and it isn't anything like super memorable, but it is enjoyable in the moment, and I like the art. It's really fun and just like clean and clear and colourful, and I really liked just the massive autumnal vibes. That I know of, we don't have anything like that in the UK. Like, we have some, I think, pumpkin patches. It's become a thing more recently where you can go and just pick a pumpkin, but we don't have like sort of almost like theme parks where you can go and there's just loads of different things you can do. So I guess this is a real thing. It sounds amazing if it is. That was a lovely vibe, and I loved hearing about all the food and stuff, and just watching their friendship. But you know, this isn't anything sort of spectacular, so I'd give that one 3 stars. Then I read Heartstopper Volume 2. I think I'd already read Volume 1 in September, and then I had Volume 2 on like requests at the library, but I was in a queue. And then when I went away for the weekend with some lovely bookish people, Lauren from Lauren and the Books, she let me Pumpkinheads, but she also had out from the library both Volumes 1 and 2 of Heartstopper. So when she read them both and she loved them, I borrowed Volume 2 from her, and then I sort of cancelled my wait at the library, so someone else could get it ahead of me. I really enjoyed it. I think these are just joyous books. When I read either of them, I just can't stop smiling. I just feel super happy and content and like warm. It's just really nice. It's about two boys who meet each other at high school, and one of them is sort of really sort of stereotypically attractive and popular, and he plays rugby, and then the other character has recently been sort of outed as gay at this all-boys school, and after some bullying he's been pretty widely accepted. And he's sort of popular like in his own way. He's very creative and artistic, and people get on with him, but he doesn't move in like a popular circle. And these two boys become really good friends, and then you watch as their relationship changes, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And Volume 3 comes out in February, so I'm very much looking forward to those. I gave them both like 4 stars, but I feel like that's me being a little bit harsh. But I really enjoyed them, so that probably is me being harsh, but I'm always harsh. And you know, I think of some of the graphic novels I've given 5 stars to in the past, and yeah, I'm not sure these can sit alongside those ones, but I did really enjoy them. So from the library I got out Women of the Dunes by Sarah Maine. This is a historical fiction sort of romance novel. It's fairly stereotypical in that, well, this is what Sarah Maine does, but this is also what a lot of authors in this sort of subgenre do, where you have a woman in the past and you have a woman in the present, and the woman in the present is uncovering something about the woman in the past, and somehow those two stories you know, link, and something is revealed towards the end, and there's a romance in both of those stories. And this is that with an extra layer. So our main character is on an archaeological dig, and she hasn't revealed to the professor she's working with that she has family ties to the location, which is an island in Scotland, I think, I can't really remember. And she goes there early to try and sort of, get a feel for the place, and she ends up bumping into, rather unwittingly, this sort of man who runs the estate that they're having to they're having to request permission to dig on. Obviously a romance is going to develop there. So there's that story, that's the present day, and they're trying to dig up this burial mound. Then you go back to a little bit further back, not super further back, maybe like 100 years, I don't even remember. I feel like maybe it was like the 1800s. And you find out a story that was going on there when the burial mound already existed. And then you go really far back to this legend of these original lovers, and you get that in little snippets, and so you follow these stories. I didn't think it was great. I preferred the other book of hers I read, which is The House Between Tides, but I will say with her books, they're so easy to read. They're so like just you can just read them in one sitting with like loads of nice cups of tea, and you can feel really cozy. I feel like they're good books to read if you're ill or just feeling a bit low. You want to just sort of closet yourself away from the world. But what I really have an issue with, and I think that was more noticeable on reading her second book, is that her female characters are characterless. They're very easily persuaded, they're very easily looked after by male characters, and they don't really have any defining characteristics. And then the male leads, like their counterparts, are always very like strong, domineering, not horrible men at all, but there's very obvious gender dynamics, and I feel like the man gets more effectively developed. It feels like maybe the author wants you to feel like you are the woman, so she strips her of characteristics so that you can sort of put yourself into her shoes. But yeah, so I think that's a lost chance, because it just makes me like not find the books particularly memorable, because the main character was just really flat. So like in the moment I'd have probably said this was like a 3-star read, but now having some time away from it I'd probably say it was like a 2-star, because it wasn't super memorable. And I think there's probably so many books of this ilk that are better. So yeah, I don't know. Take from that what you will. So I then have 2 books that I do actually own that I read I think in October. Also, I just want to say sorry if I sound like a little bit coldy. I think I may have a small cold developing, so sorry if I sound a bit gross. So firstly, I've chatted about this in a video back in October, I think it was, because we just moved house, and this is the first book I picked up when we moved in, and I really enjoyed it. So this is Expectation by Anna Hope. So is it called that? Yes, it is. So this follows, yeah, I thought it was 3 friends. So it follows 3 friends, God, I've tried to say that, who are in, I think, like their 30s. And their lives have all gone really different ways, but they're all somehow jealous of one another. So one of them is recently married, and it was a bit of a like fast marriage because she found out she was pregnant when she'd been with this man for a very short time. And so she's not really happy, she doesn't really like his family, she's unsure whether she's made the right decision in staying with him. And they moved to this small village, and she's just unhappy, and she really misses her career. And then one of the other friends is a very successful businesswoman. She's very happily married, but she's desperate for children and is really struggling to have children with her husband. And they're going to lots of like clinics, and they're trying lots of different options, and that's become a real issue in their marriage. And then the third friend is still trying to be a successful actress, and you feel like she's about to get her big break, and you're told that she's like incredibly beautiful, and all men want to, be with her, and she's sort of moved through life without building a relationship with any single person, because she's been so focused on her career, and so she wants the career, but sort of also wants the relationship. So they all want something that the other ones had, and they went to university together, some of them went to school together and knew each other when they were even younger. And so you see each of them from their own perspective. This is, multiple narrative, but you also see the other woman from their perspectives. I love books like that, particularly when they're about women, because I love, we get to see the complexity of people and their decisions. and I love when you see something that's done from one character's perspective and you think, oh, like, that's a bit cruel, but I understand why you did it. And then you see it from the other person's perspective who they did it to, and then you view it in like a different light. I find that really fascinating. I think that really captured that. Like, in the moment, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I think when I look back at the books I read in the year, this isn't like a massive standout, you know, it's not going to be one of my favourites, but it wasn't a reading experience I really enjoyed, and I'd happily read loads more books like this and follow this author now. So I definitely recommend this. I feel like if you enjoy Sally Rooney but maybe find her a bit too experimental, this is that sort of vibe. Also, a lot of people recommended to me Belinda McKeon, if you enjoy Sally Rooney, and I feel like she's, again, similar to that. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. Sadly, this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. That's The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I really didn't enjoy it, and I feel so bizarre saying that because I was so convinced that I would. Which is an odd thing, actually, because I've now read, how many Anne Patchetts have I read now? This is my 4th, and I've only actually really enjoyed one of them. So I loved Commonwealth, I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. I then read Bel Canto, enjoyed it, but I thought it had some pretty big issues, so I think I gave that like 3 stars. Then I more recently read The Magician's Assistant, again enjoyed it, but thought it had some pretty big issues. And I think I gave that one 3 stars as well. This one I'd give like 2 stars. So you follow this man and you're told that he and his sister grew up in a house called the Dutch House, which was this elaborate, slightly ridiculous house that was built by a Dutch family many, many years ago, and his father, when he came into a lot of wealth, bought the house. Early on in the book you find out that his father remarried, and you know that somehow this remarriage resulted in them as adults now not living in the Dutch house. And so the book opens with this adult man and his sister meeting outside the Dutch house in the car and sort of saying, like, you know, why are we doing this again? Why are we sitting here? And then you find out about what happened, and then you find out about their lives going forward. So I didn't like the main character at all. I don't know if you're supposed to. I thought he was incredibly spoiled, smug. I didn't like the way he viewed women. He really loves his sister, but other than that, I felt incredibly sorry for his wife. I thought the character development she was given was pretty poor. I found the whole premise really tedious. So I really enjoy slow novels that focus on characters, but I think when you do that, the characters need to be interesting, and the issue they're battling with needs to be complex, and also you need to be able to empathise with it. And I just didn't care about the Dutch house. I mean, sucks to be you. You grew up with a really wealthy family in this big old fancy house, and now you don't get to live there anymore, but you've come into loads more money, so who cares? Like, move on. Like, you have a family around you, you have people who love you, you and your sister still have one another. Like, I can understand if they were missing a person, you know, which is sort of part of the plot, but not really the main focus. But it's not, it's that they don't get to live in this big fancy house anymore. Like, I just think it's really indulgent. And I didn't like him at all. I thought the ending was inevitable from the first page. I think perhaps you're supposed to figure that out, but yeah, I really didn't enjoy it. And there's moments where I can still admire Anne Patchett's writing style. It's just really easy to read and really easy to get through, but there was no element of the plot or the characters that I liked, so yeah, bad times. So then I have a couple more novels to talk about that I borrowed from the library, and the first one is, I'm going to check the author's name, Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I just saw some fluff go past. So I, like I said, borrowed this from the library on a bit of a whim. I was just really quickly in there and thought I'd give it a go because I'd heard of it. This is a YA contemporary novel about a young girl who doesn't have any sort of in real life friends, and she's very lonely and isolated, and she is also the writer and artist behind a really successful online webcomic. So she actually makes a good deal of money out of it, and she knows that it could sort of set up her future career. and her parents are aware that she does something to do with an online webcomic, but they don't really understand, and so it's this big sort of secret really. And she has an online persona, and only 2 people who she's met online over the years know who she truly is. And then right at the start, this new boy joins her school who doesn't talk, and he reveals to her that he is a massive fan of her comic, and things develop from there, and she starts to sort of try and push herself out of her comfort zone by becoming friends with this guy, whilst knowing that it's all a bit false, because he doesn't know who she truly is. He thinks she's just also a fan of this webcomic. So on the one hand, I really enjoyed this. I mean, it was so easy to read. I've really been in the mood recently of reading books that I can get through in like 1 or 2 sittings, and that's been really nice. And I did feel that way about it. I like the pacing. I find with a lot of young adult novels, the pacing's just a bit off. I didn't feel that way. Her parents they weren't absent, which I know is a bit of a trope in YA, but yeah, I guess in some ways that relationship with them feels a little bit unrealistic, but it was something that didn't really bother me. So I really enjoyed this. The only real issue I had with this is something, I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to spoil anything, but you'll know what I mean if you've read the book. Something happens towards the end between the 2 of them, and I felt like the guy character comes across pretty awfully, but the author didn't seem to examine that. Like, me, as an adult reader, was just thinking, he's a selfish dick, and she doesn't owe him anything. But the main character didn't think that, and that was never examined, and so I feel like we were supposed to think he was right, and that our character did owe him something, which I didn't agree with at all. So if you've read this book, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because that was the only thing about it that really sort of disappointed me, because I just felt like, yeah, I didn't agree, basically. And I thought that was a shame, because to me it showed a lack of understanding on the author's part. So yeah, there was that. And the next one is A Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing by Mira Jacob. So I read and adored Good Talk by Mira Jacob, which is a graphic memoir, and as soon as I finished that, I had a look, saw she had another book, and so I reserved it at the library. Absolutely fucking love this one too. Brilliant books. I highly recommend them. I'm going to be really bad at talking about this succinctly because I loved it so much. So I'm going to link a review that Eleanor did up here. Eleanor and I badly read this book. We both loved it, and she's done a full-length video talking about it. So in brief, this is a novel split in 2 timelines. One is the present day of the novel, which is actually set around 20 years ago, when our main character gets a phone call from her mother saying, your father's being really weird, don't know if there's something going on with him, can you come home and visit and see how you think he is? And when she gets home, she realises that by weird, her mother means that her father has started to talk to ghosts, those ghosts being his own mother and his son. And he does it and then won't acknowledge that he does it to them, and it's becoming more and more obvious and less sort of hidden, and it's affecting his work as a brain surgeon, which is obviously a massive concern. Then in the past storyline, we go back to when our protagonist was a child, and her growing up with her brother as a first-generation Indian American, and what that was like, and also what it was like to go back to India and visit their father's family, and the conflict there between her grandmother and her mother. Her grandmother really wants them to go back to India. She's convinced that it's the mother who doesn't want them to go back, when in fact we as the reader know it's the father. And there's lots of tragic things that happen in that storyline, which I'm not going to spoil because I think you should experience them yourselves. But we know right from the start of the novel that the brother is no longer around, so we know we're building up in the past storyline to the loss of him. And the tragic event that happens to the family in India and the tragic event that happens to him are both linked by sleep, or the lack of it, and the things people will do to do with sleep, really. I don't want to say any more than that. And in the present day, we also have this storyline. There's so many themes in this novel, it's phenomenal, where our protagonist was becoming a rather successful photojournalist, and then she took a rather infamous photo of a man jumping from a bridge to kill himself, and there's lots more history behind that photo which is revealed in the novel. And she, since that moment, has sort of just paused her career because she can't move away from the fact that she was a person who, in the moment she realised someone was about to kill themselves, her first instinct was to pull the camera and take the shot, and then to print it, and then to sell it. And so there's all these layers, all these themes, and they're all handled so deftly. You never feel like there's too many. It's quite a long novel, it's nearly 500 pages I think. It never feels too long. It's wrapped up beautifully, but you feel like you could stay with these family for their whole lives. There's beautiful family dynamics, friendships, relationships, just everything is so believable. It's absolutely phenomenal, and the fact that that was her debut novel is unreal. Honestly, you have to read it. It's absolutely amazing. One of my favourite books of the year. So there's that one. And then I didn't mean to do this, but I also have 2 other books I gave 5 stars to, and these ones are non-fiction books that I read during Non-Fiction November. So firstly we have Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls by T. Kira Madden. This is a memoir in a collection of essays, which I've realised is something I really bloody love. This book is so good. So I read the first like 30 pages and loved it, and then just put it down because I had so many books out from the library, and then a couple of weeks later I was like, actually I really want to go back to that, and I started again because I felt like I just loved those essays so much I wanted to read them again, and I could just read this over and over again. It is absolutely amazing. So the author, I think, is around my age, like late 20s, early 30s, and I believe this is her first book. And the book is really focused on the relationship she had with both her mother and her father. And the collection of essays are not told in like in a oh my god, what can I think of words, chronological fashion. And they're told by themes. So we have a whole section on like girlhood and growing up and the sort of really toxic relationships she had with women, as well as the relationships filled with love that she had with women, and sometimes ones that were a bit of both. There's a whole collection of essays on her father, and there's a whole collection of essays on her relationship with her mother. And the life T. Kira Madden led and leads is fascinating. So she grew up in a really wealthy family in Florida, in an area I think called the Rat's Mouth. Is it Boca Raton or something? Oh my god, I'm going to say this wrong. But so initially she lived with her mother, who is Chinese Hawaiian, and her mother had been having an affair with her father whilst he was married with 2 sons, and they lived alone. And then her father, quite early in her life, left his other family and came to live with them and married her mother. And from that moment on, she lives a life of extreme privilege on one hand in terms of money. Her house is just insane. She has anything she wants. And zero privilege on the other hand, in that her parents are drug addicts, and the FBI are regularly after her father, and she doesn't really ever understand what's going on. And because of her parents' relationship with drugs, that sometimes leads to violence to one another and neglect of her, and just a real unawareness of what she's doing with her life, particularly when she's a teenager. She gets in really awful situations which are really hard to read about. There's so many things. I was going to say what I love about this book. I can't really say that. There's so many things to love about this book. She writes absolutely beautifully. Just pure poetry. She captures all these moments that most people would never talk about to anyone, let alone write down and then decide to let anyone else see. But it never feels indulgent, and it never feels unnecessary. It's very open, so like she's very honest about things that aren't nice things. She doesn't try and make herself or others sound like decent people. She's just honest. And I think what you take away from this memoir is, I think this is what her intention was, is that her parents are really flawed people, but yet you can understand why she has so much love for them. Her father sadly passed away, but I was watching a reading she did, and she reads a bit about her mother, and her mother is in the audience, and her mother's come along, and so I think that's amazing to have had to say to her mother, you know, I've written this book and there's some things in it that you might not want everyone to know, but it's really important to me to get this on paper, and the fact that that's been okay. So it's just amazing. Like, as an example, there's a couple of bits, there's some bits that are really funny, and there's some bits that are also just really like, you just can't believe it. In one of the first chapters, she tells you that before her father came to live with them, her mother kept a mannequin from a storefront. And the reason she kept the mannequin was because she wanted to put the mannequin near the window in the house, dressed in man's clothes, to make people think that a man lived with them, so they'd be less vulnerable in the area they lived in. And there's a whole essay about that. It's very weird, but really interesting. And that sort of leads on to you being told that her mother once, a man tried to climb into her bedroom window naked, and she shot him, and then when he fell out of the window, he actually rolled out and landed off her property. So she dragged him back onto her property to shoot him again, so that she could get away with it being for trespassing. And you're told that within like the first few essays, so you're already aware of like, on the one hand you're like, I really don't want to admire her for that, but on the other hand you're like, fucking hell, like, way to look after yourself. And that's sort of the dynamic of her parents the whole way through, the sort of people they are, where on the one hand you're like, that's really awful, but on the other hand you're like, but yet you're amazing. And so you get a real insight into how she must feel about them. Please read it, it's so good, and I'll read anything she writes now, and I think she's absolutely fascinating. And then one I read very recently, I listened to this one on audiobook, is How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. This is narrated by the author, and it is so bloody good. So this isn't a particularly long audiobook, and I'd really like to own this one in print form. It's not actually out in the UK, I think it comes out next year, so I'll definitely pick it up. It's always a fine line for me, so I listen to generally like fantasy and non-fiction on audio. I don't tend to listen to anything else on audio. Fantasy because I feel like I don't need to pay as much attention to the language, and non-fiction because I think it adds so much to listen to the person themselves read it. And the one issue I have with this is that he reads it beautifully, so I feel like it added loads, but I equally feel that his writing style is also pure fucking poetry, and I feel saddened by the fact that I couldn't like pause whilst reading and reread bits and tab them, so I definitely want to get a copy of this. This is really a combination of a love letter to his mother, and also an exploration of how he came to terms with being a black gay man in modern America, and how terrifying that was for him and for all the people around him. So he's raised by a single mother, and throughout the book a big part of the discussion is the fact that he's never really articulated to his mother that he is gay. And it's sort of this unsaid thing, but you can tell he really desperately wants it to not be, and he wants it to be vocalised. So the memoir starts when he's very young, and you watch him as a young boy realise that he has interest in other boys and men, and him sort of exploring that. And when he goes to university, he becomes really promiscuous because it's so obvious that he's just desperate to find a relationship that's like okay, but he doesn't really know how to do that. And so instead of that, he just tries to find something that will make him forget, and for him that becomes sleeping with lots of strangers. For others it would be alcohol or drugs, but for him it becomes that he puts himself in really unsafe situations, really, which he openly says. And so there's points in this book that are pretty awful. There's certain situations where he meets with an older white man to sleep with him, and the white man is very obviously racist towards him, but yet he stays. But he starts to buy into what this man's saying and like perpetuates it himself. So yeah, this is sort of in 3 sections, I guess. One is him as a boy, which is beautiful. One is him at university, which is, you know, quite hard to read at points. And then one is following on from that. And throughout all of that, it's him trying to fight for his life, realising at a young age that being a black boy who will become a black man is a really dangerous person to be in America, in that other people want to hurt you, and so you're a danger to yourself because other people put something on you. And then to realise that he also is gay, and that how in a lot of people's perception those two things are both issues, and they also don't make sense as a package. Like this image of a black man, this violent image in the media, you know, where police officers feel like, you know, they pull the trigger and ask questions later, and then pairing that with him being gay, which again, a lot of homophobic people would be like, oh, that makes you less of a man, and so how those two things can go together. It's really beautifully explored in the book, as well as I said, his relationship with his mother. He so obviously worships her. The book opens with him describing his mother, and it just makes you want to sob just hearing it. It's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, both these memoirs are absolutely amazing. So I would, yeah, love for people to, you know, the last 3 books I talk about, like, please read them. They're some of my best books of the year, and I feel really lucky to have read them all in like a really short space of time. And now I feel really spoiled. Like when I go to other books, I'm like, meh, because like, you know, nothing can reach those heights. So please let me know if you read them, and also let me know if you have any recommendations for books that sound like them that you think I would enjoy. So those are all the books I read in October and November. I thought this was going to be a short video, but I hadn't really prepared myself for the fact that I want to talk about the ones I love loads. So here we are. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you read any of them, as I said, and I will chat to you in another video. Bye.